in 2001 and passed all his subjects. During his days at the grammar school, he was very active in sports, participating in football and track events such as the 100 and 200-meter races. However, he was not the best sportsman and never really earned any medal. After his secondary education, he proceeded to the Delta State University, Abraka, where he studied zoology and began to develop an interest in hydrobiology. As an undergraduate student, Professor Odume was consistently top of his class and was awarded the HOD Prize at graduation. He was deeply involved in campus politics and was elected the president of the National Association of Zoology Students. He recalls how he would leave classes to campaign for votes during the student electioneering period. Although campus politics took much of his time, he still managed to graduate top of his class. The journey to Rhodes University began when he received a Carnegie Prize offer for a scholarship from the Institute for Water Research, the IWR, at Rhodes University. Initially, this offer was towards his MSc in Water Resources Science, but was later extended to cover his PhD, when he completed his master's degree in record time with distinction. Professor Odume has since remained at Rhodes University, right from the days of being a master's degree student to his current position as the director of the Institute for Water Research. He has published over 60 articles in peer-reviewed journals and 5 book chapters. He has authored over 30 technical reports and has presented over 35 papers at local and international conferences. He has supervised 10 PhDs and 9 master's students to completion. 6 of these students, 4 PhDs, and 2 master's students will be graduating during the October 2024 Rhodes University graduation. He has also hosted 5 postdoctoral fellows, actively mentoring them to take active research leadership roles. Professor Odume's research is internationally acclaimed. He has secured external research funding worth more than 70 million rand from local and international funding agencies. One of these funded research projects, which have provided scholarships to over 50 students and staff from 23 different African countries. Professor Odume's research has received local and international awards, including being the first recipient of the Emerging River Leader Award by the International River Foundation in Australia and the Bronze Medal Award by the Southern African Society for Aquatic Scientists. Professor Odume's research collaborations are extensive. He has collaborated with partners from over 30 countries in Africa, Europe, North America, Asia, South America, and Australia. He believes in the value of engaged participatory research that is impactful across all levels of society. He has worked with industry practitioners, civil society organizations, and communities to find solutions to water-related challenges. Working with his colleagues, he has developed tools and guidelines for resolving contested water quality challenges in South Africa, established SDG social innovation platforms, and strengthened the participatory capacity of ordinary community members to engage in water discourses. Professor Odume is regularly called upon as an external examiner. He has acted as an external examiner for 5 PhD students' theses and 12 master's theses for local and international universities. He is currently the chairperson of the Africa chapter of the Society for Freshwater Science and the editor of Aquatic Sciences, and has reviewed manuscripts for more than 20 journals. He's regularly called upon to review funding applications by both local and international funding agencies. Professor Odume is the director of the Institute of Water Research, which incorporates the Arua Center of Excellence in Water and the Center for Environmental Water Quality. The Institute is the lead of the African Water Resources Mobility Network, the co-host of the Arua Guild Cluster of Research Excellence in Water Resource Management for a Sustainable and Just Future. It is also a co-implementing partner of the Future Earth Africa Hub Leadership Center, as well as the Secretariat of the Society for Freshwater Science, the Africa chapter. Professor Odume believes that much of his success is owed to his family, academic mentors, friends, colleagues, students, partners, and collaborators who have at different times contributed to who he is today. Professor Odume recalls what his mother said to him when he was much younger. I am not very educated. I feed my family through hard labor tilling the soil, but my children will not go through a similar experience. That is why you must go to school and I will support your education. That would be mom. He is the first graduate in his family. He is married to Mrs. Ejiro Praise Odume. She is very supportive and the secret behind much of the successes he has reported to date. Their marriage is blessed with 3 amazing children, Daisy Nelson Odume, Danica Nelson Odume, and Danielle Nelson Odume. I have the greatest pleasure inviting Professor Ogenakaro Nelson Odume to present his inaugural lecture entitled Water for Ecological and Social Justice.
Good evening, and thank you, DVC, for that extensive introduction. I'm indeed very grateful. Do we have Deputy Vice Chancellors, Deans of Faculties, Heads of Departments, colleagues, friends, I'm deeply honored by your presence. I'm a bit emotional now, but hopefully I will get over it. I want to especially thank my family, friends, colleagues, and my students, former and current, who have made this day possible, and all those who have traveled far afield. I'm not always emotional, but I don't know what is Oh my goodness. All right, let's do this. Okay. In Africa, the task of raising a child is that of the entire family and the entire community. You would agree with me that it is impossible for one to achieve any meaningful height in society without the contribution of others. Indeed, I stand before you because of these people who have contributed to my life and to what I am today. As Isaac Newton said, and I quote, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." By this, please permit me to acknowledge a few people who have shaped what I have become today. You will agree with me that it is impossible to mention everyone's name. Otherwise, I may have to ask the Vice Chancellor to give me 2 inaugural lectures, one dedicated to acknowledging people and the other to the task of science. But I know the VC will not approve this. I would like to start by acknowledging the presence of my wife, Mrs. Ejiro Praise Odume. She is indeed a pillar of support in every way imaginable. Even though she is also studying, she has managed to balance her academic work and the task of taking care of the home. Those of you who knows me very well, I travel quite a lot on research work across the entire breadth and length of the continent and across the globe. While I am away, she is taking care of the home. I want to use this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to her. And I want to say to our kids, Orezimena, Evaisi, and Okezimena, you are the best, and Daddy loves you. To my parents, although you are not here today to join us physically, I am sure you are online listening to this presentation today. I would like to say to you that I'm indeed grateful for all your sacrifices. I cannot even begin to mention everything you have done for me and my siblings. Oriakpo bin woro, megoloka kuwaino, e viberome and maybe Yerowai, Merigwose, Merigwoni. As you know, Africa is diverse, and diversity is reality. I want to thank my younger brother, Dr. Solomon Uriri, who has traveled from Nigeria to celebrate this day with me in person. I am grateful. I want to recall and appreciate my late auntie, Mrs. Felicia Igo, who was a pillar of support for my education. I recalled how I received the news of the Carnegie Rise Scholarship. The scholarship will only take off once I am here in South Africa. So there was no provision for my visa cost. There was no provision for my air ticket, but these were a challenge. I couldn't raise the money for my ticket, and I couldn't raise the money for my visa. She made it possible. Deputy Vice Chancellors, colleagues and friends, throughout my academic career, I have been very fortunate to work with incredible and amazing people. People who have shaped my intellectual perspectives, and people who have shaped my curiosity as a scientist. My journey as a scholar began under the mentorship of Professor Arobi Ikomi, who supervised my first degree research project at the Delta State University, Abraka, Nigeria. I recall how I would struggle with identification of freshwater fishes, and I will call on Professor Ikomi, who was then the Dean of Faculty of Science, and he was a very busy man. But each time I called on him, he would immediately say, Odume, I'm coming. We can look at it together. And in fact, I took this and I use it to my advantage. So anytime I want to speak to him as a supervisor informally, I will pretend that I cannot identify the fish. So I will call on him, Prof, there is a difficult specimen here. Can you come and help me? And he will come. So I'm grateful. I want to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Nikita Mula. I'm sure she's here. Please, Nikita is there. Who is here to celebrate with me on this day? Dr. Mula is an excellent mentor. When I arrived here at Rose University in 2009, Nikita was my master's degree supervisor. And I will never forget, when I submitted my first chapters to her, in my mind, I had done what a student should do. I have analyzed the data, presented beautiful tables and graphs, and I was indeed very convinced that this is a good chapter. But to my greatest surprise, she called me into her office and said to me, Nelson, nobody has time to read tables and figures with raw data. But I've analyzed these data, okay? But she's calling them raw data. She said to me, go back, analyze the data, and write the chapters again. In my mind, I was wondering, what does it mean to analyze data? How could this be raw data? But of course, today, and I know better. Thank you, Nikita. I enjoy every bit of time we have together at the Institute for Water Research. My intellectual work has been hugely influenced by my academic mentor, Professor Tali Palmer. Tali, please wave so that we can show our appreciation to you. Tali is here to celebrate with me and has traveled from Cape Town. And you know, when you are an emeritus professor, even when the VC tells you come, you can decide to tell the VC, I'm busy. I will not be coming because you now own your time. But as soon as I phoned Tali that my inaugural lecture has been dated for today, she made every effort to be here. I'm so appreciative of your presence, Tali. After I had submitted several chapters of my PhD thesis to Professor Palmer, of course, with many pages, page 1 to several hundreds of pages, and she has been reading these, giving me feedback. At what point? She asked me, Nelson, what is your contribution to the discipline? And what is novel about what you are doing? I wonder, but you have been reading all this. The contribution is there. And these questions kept me awake. I will go home, I will talk to anybody that cares to listen. What does it mean to make contribution to a discipline? Does it mean you have to invent something new that nobody has done before? what does it actually mean to make a contribution? And what does it mean for your work to be novel? So I will go home thinking the whole night about what my contribution and novelty would be. And I really want to appreciate Tali, who is my academic mentor and parent. And a lot of what I'm going to be presenting today have been hugely influenced by her thinking and what she has passed on to me. So I want to really say thank you, Professor Palmer. My venturing into the field of the social sciences, as you know, I'm a natural scientist, began with the work I did with Professor Chris DeVet, another emeritus professor. So it appears that all the mentors are now becoming emeritus. Chris is an intellectual giant. The Water Research Commission at that time put out a call on environmental ethics and water resource management. Then I was just completing my PhD, and Professor Tali again said to Chris and I that we should consider applying for this project. But here I am, a natural scientist, just completing my thesis. I have no experience in social sciences. Neither have I ever conducted research in the social sciences. But the field of environmental ethics, as you will agree with me, is very philosophical. So bringing philosophy into reality in the area of water was quite challenging. But I embrace this task, and working with Chris has been immensely impactful. You will see in my presentation that much of the work that I will be presenting intersect both social sciences and the natural sciences. But do not get confused. I'm trained a natural scientist. So I want to thank Professor Chris. I'm sure he is online listening to me. Appears unmuted. At this juncture, I also want to appreciate the presence of Professor Francis Arimoro, who is here with me to celebrate this day with me. He has traveled from Nigeria. Professor Francis, wherever you are, please, if you can wave. Professor Arimoro is more than a mentor. He is a friend, he is a mentor, he is what you should pray for as an academic. Francis taught me a lot of the hydrobiology concepts that I use today in my research, which of course I am passing on to other students who are working with me today. Francis has been very influential in terms of what I have done to date. He's a great mentor, and I value and cherish our friendship. At this juncture, permit me to record the valued support I have received from the immediate past Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation, Professor Peter Clayton, and the current Deputy Vice Chancellor, Research and Innovation, Research, Innovation and Strategic Partnership, Dr. Noma Kwesi Zilikazi. Professor Clayton's support was instrumental in keeping my work going at the Institute for Water Research. Peter, I want to especially thank you for supporting my work and for encouraging me when I was down. You spoke with me and you reassured me that you will continue to support my work. So I am indeed very grateful. Our current DVC has been a pillar of support, not only to me, but the entire Institute for Water Research, which I lead. And I really want to appreciate our Deputy Vice Chancellor. I was looking at people with red, but And I really want to appreciate our Deputy Vice Chancellor responsible for research, innovation, and strategic partnership. Since assuming office, she has provided strategic leadership and perspective to the entire research ecosystem within the Institute. She has made personal sacrifices to be here physically, and I know that she traveled here this morning from Stellenbosch. So thank you so much. I'm grateful. And I also want to acknowledge our Deputy Vice Chancellor, responsible for teaching and learning, who has also made personal sacrifices to be here. And in fact, she traveled today to be here, yesterday. So thank you so much. I'm grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, the work I present today reflects my research ethos, that excellent research is a collaborative research. I'm not able to mention every name, but everywhere you are, and everyone that you see on these slides today reflects the work that I've done. You will agree with me that I can't mention everybody on that slide, right? But it shows the depth and the people that I've worked with across various times in my career. So I will not be able to mention everybody, but please permit me to single out a few people. Dr. Shika Nadozie, who is here today. Shika has been very supportive in terms of my research. Dr. Paul Mensah, who has traveled all the way from Ghana, University of Cape Coast, to celebrate this day with me. Professor Liz Mark, who has traveled all the way from Michigan State University in the United States to celebrate this day with me. Dr. Nick Griffin, who has supported me to date. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Eric Igbinige, Dr. Frank Akamaguna, Dr. Fenji Matereshere Mitochi, for all their unwavering support. Please, if I have not mentioned your name, it is not because I do not value what you have done or contributed in my life, but it's because of time. Remember what I said at the beginning of this lecture. The VC will not allow me to inaugural lectures. I particularly value the contribution of all my past and present postdoctoral fellows, students, and colleagues. And I also want to appreciate the contribution and support, the unwavering support of the staff and students at the Institute for Water Research, IWR. And I can tell you that without them, I will not be standing here today to present this inaugural lecture. And I really want to say that I value all that you've done. My collaboration is extensive across the globe, and the map that you see there shows the countries in which I have drawn my collaborators from. And it is not possible to even mention all these countries. And it is not possible to mention everyone that you see there. But please, let me just, because of the depth of the work we've done together, let me just single out a few universities where some of my collaborators are working. I want to thank all my colleagues at Michigan State University in the United States. I also want to thank all my colleagues at the University of Alabama. I want to thank my colleagues at TU Delft, the International Institute for Applied System Analysis in Austria, the University of Bayero in Germany, University of Montpellier in France, Archie University in Germany, University of Kinshasa in DRC, Makerere University in Uganda, the Higher School of Hydraulics in Algeria, Federal University of Technology in Mina, University of Porto here in South Africa, University of Cape Town, also in South Africa, University of Pretoria, University of Ljubljana, More University, University of Lagos, University of South Africa, and some of my colleagues from the University of South Africa have traveled from Johannesburg and they are here with me today. The University of Pretoria, Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Nigeria, Stockholm University, the African Water Resources Mobility Network partners, the Arua Water COE partners, the Africa-Europe Cluster on Water Network partners, the Future Earth African Hub partners. DVC, I want to announce that I have colleagues from across every region of Africa, from West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa, who are here present as part of the Future Earth African Hub work that we are doing together. Please, colleagues, if you're here, if you can just wave your hands so that we can appreciate your presence. Thank you. I also want to appreciate my colleagues who are part of the Africa Multiple Cluster of Research Excellence, funded by the German government, the Rose University African Studies Center partners, and the Society for Freshwater Science colleagues. And of course, the work that I'm going to be presenting today, without funding, it will be impossible to deliver. And I want to acknowledge the National Research Foundation, and their representatives are here, Michael, Prudence. I want to say thank you for all the support that you've provided me, the funding that you've provided me that allows me to work and to support my students and colleagues. But also the Water Research Commission have been very supportive of my research, and I want to show my gratitude. Now I move on to the presentation. Don't tell me you are tired. Let me start it. So, I will start my presentation by sharing a story with you. In 2009, I was renting at in a particular flat along New Street. And then an elderly man came to me and asked me, "What are you studying?" And I said, "I'm studying water resources." He said, "Oh, you're going to be a rain doctor. So you will make rain happen." Just to prove tonight that actually I'm not a rain doctor, I want to start by saying that if you look at if you look at what you have there now, you will see that water is so important in our lives. As a Christian, water is critical for our baptism and it signifies purity, right? But you can see my photo and Professor Yakairu George, who is here today celebrating with me from Makerere. And I was in Uganda because the fresh air coming out of that was so nice. I was just relaxing. Okay, so water can also provide that for us. But here you have people who are communicating with ancestors through water. And at the same time, when I started the work on ethics, one of the case studies that I analyzed was the river Ganges in India. And then I realized that the river Ganges, or Ganga as they will call it in some places, is so important for spiritual cleansing. And the photo there are people who are actually dipping themselves into the river for purification. And here you have somebody who is trying to catch fish. So water is so essential to our life that even the United Nations, in terms of the SDG 6, water is life. So water is not just about making rain happen. But this precious resource is under threat. And the map that you see here shows the risk. What is a water map risk? And what you can see here is that Africa is really at risk, both in terms of the physical availability of water Also in terms of quality, but very importantly, because of systemic, institutional, and governance challenges. So we have to really think about water in a way that allows us to respond to some of these risks. In South Africa, for example, precipitation is far, far lower than evaporation, to the extent that the average deficit is about 936 millimeter per annum. So we're really living in a country where water is considered as a scarce resource. But what are some of these drivers of water security challenges that we see on the continent? Climate change and variability is a key and critical driver. Population and economic growth. And because of population and economic growth, the demand for water is now projected to outstrip supply. Pollution and ecosystem degradation is also a critical challenge in the water sector. And if you look at this particular chart that I want to show to you now, you will see this is the various sectors in terms of their water demand in South Africa. And agriculture alone is consuming about 60%, is responsible for 60% of water consumption in South Africa, and followed by municipal/domestic. So if we really want to intervene, we have to look at some of these high water user sectors across the country. But when we talk about agriculture, it is not just in terms of irrigation. What we need to also know is that the food that we consume, when we consume any kind of food, we're actually consuming water. Just as an example, the chart that I showed to you tells you how much water you consume whenever you consume a particular product. So if you have hot chocolate today, you will then realize that you're actually a big water user. So we need to start consuming less chocolate. All right. So coming back to South Africa again, the country has just developed and published the third edition of the National Water Resource Strategy. And in terms of the analysis that has been done in that document, about 3 million people have no access to basic water supply. And it tells you that we really have to try and do something about this. And 36% of households, they have no assurance of water supply. So you may have water sometime, but of course, if you live in Grahamstown, you should be used to this. And I should immediately move on because we are all very familiar with the concept of not having water all the time. But very, very, very importantly, about 44% of wastewater treatment works in South Africa are considered dysfunctional. What that means is that they release untreated wastewater into our rivers, into the environment. And this is an ecological crisis, actually. And at least by estimate, we will need about 33 billion rands per annum over the next 10 years to address the water problem that we have in this country. So it's not a small enterprise, but I believe we can do it collectively. So my talk today is entitled Water for Ecological and Social Justice. How do I come about this particular topic? When I was asked to give my inaugural lecture, I reflected and I was thinking about what is it that I need to talk about. And I reflected on my journey to date. And I said, but I have worked across discipline. And usually when you work across discipline, you have that challenge of bringing it together. But what has really shaped what I want to talk today, if you look at this this particular model was developed by our students and postdoc at the Institute for Water Research. And it gives you a typical outlook of a river catchment. And what you see there, you have some animals looking for water to drink. And you have some plants also flourishing because of water. But you also have people and households who also depends on water. And if that is the case, it then means that everyone needs water, whether you are a human being or a non-human, you need water. So as humans, we really have to do justice by ensuring that everyone needs water, whether they are plants or animal, but everyone also needs water, whether they are powerful or not. So water, access to water, is not just a matter of social justice, it's a matter of ecological justice as well. So when we talk about the concept of justice, let me just illustrate how somehow this is encapsulated in the National Water Act of South Africa. So if you consider that all the water we have in South Africa is in these buckets, okay, we have what we call ecological reserve and human need reserve. So the concept of ecological reserve implies that at least we must have water for basic human need. Every human being must have water for basic human need, for cooking, for drinking, for hygiene. But at the same time, we must also leave some water behind for the ecosystem. So these two are the only legally guaranteed right to water in South Africa, the basic human need and for ecosystem protection. Thereafter, every drop of water, the remaining drop of water in terms of whether quantity or quality or assurance of supply can then be administratively allocated. But the way in which you allocate to different sectors of society is a question of justice. And the fact that you have to leave water behind for people and for the environment is also a matter of justice. Hence, my talk today on ecological and social justice. So if we're going to be talking about justice, it also implies the idea of water security. But when we look at water security, when one asks me, what is water security? I say, well, it's a complex concept. It is multidimensional. So water security, we have to look at it, whether we are going to be secure or not, but it also entails the idea of quantity. So how much water do we have? Do we have enough water for the intended purpose? But also in terms of quality, I have had a lot of people come to me, Nelson, is this good water? And my response is always, it depends. I don't know, it depends. So because the quality of water that is needed for drinking is not the same quality of water for irrigation. It's not the same quality of water for industry. So the quality really depends on the intended use. You also cannot talk about water security without the concept of accessibility. And when we talk about accessibility, we should not think about it only in terms of physical accessibility. You may have water flowing through underneath your house, but if you don't have money to pay for it, you can't actually access it. So there is the physical and the economic dimension of accessibility, but also in terms of assurance of supply in Grahamstown. It is really not true that we don't have water. We have water, but it is not assured. So every now and then you wake up, there's water today, there is no water, right? So the assurance of supply is not there. So if you want to talk about water security, you also have to consider the concept of assurance of supply, both in terms of quantity, quality, but also importantly, in terms of time and space. And finally, ecosystem health, integrity, and resilience. Because we have to protect the ecosystem, which actually supplies us the water. So water, as Tali would say, does not come from your tap. Water comes from the catchment. Okay, so you really have to protect the base of the water, where the water actually comes from. At the dawn of democracy in South Africa, a piece of legislation, the National Water Act, was promulgated. This Act number 36 of 1998 is the foundation of how we manage water resources in South Africa. And critically, it provides for three principles or values. The first one being sustainability, equity, and efficiency. So together, these principles will look at water resource management in South Africa, either in terms of protection or use, development, conservation, management, or control through the lenses of these three principles. And what you see there is just the water value chain. On your left, you have the catchment side, the water resources, and to your right is the water supply. The water supply is governed and regulated through the Water Services Act, and I will not be dwelling much on that today. But what I want to share with you is that the way we manage our water resources in South Africa is critically important and is informed by these three intersecting principles. So given that my talk is both ecological justice and social justice, how do we know that what we're doing to the environment is good or bad? How do we know? So I will share with you the idea of ecological condition of our water resources. How do we know that we're not doing justice? How do we know that we are doing injustice to our water resources? So basically, if you take a river or any water resource, for example, you will have the hydrological aspect, you have habitat, natural habitat, you have the chemistry, the physicochemical dimension, and all of these interact. So when we utilize our water resources in a sustainable manner, these will interact and drive biological response. And the biological dimension will include stuff like fish, macroinvertebrates, vegetation, and all of these will react and tell us what we are doing to our environment, whether good or bad. Basically, you don't want your activities to impart on a system to the extent that you have from A going to F. So in South Africa, we are able to determine whether we are doing good or bad to our environment, whether we are doing justice or injustice by categorizing, doing our analysis and categorizing the condition of the system. So if you do your analysis and it turns out to be F, it means that we have terribly impacted on this system to a point where the changes may be irreversible. We really don't want to do that to our system. And for us to be able to know how much impact we actually doing to the environment, especially our water resources, there are a variety of ways we can do this. But I just want to share with you today that when you go to a river and you see what you call caucasus here, they can actually tell you a story about the health of the environment. So some of them are very sensitive, some of them are not. So depending on what you see there, you can tell a story about the condition of the water, whether it is seriously impacted or not. And what I really love about this is that anytime I go out in the field with students, they love it. They can see, they can play with them, they can tell a story about the water by just jumping into the river, catching some of those. So next time when you see that, you should be able to know what the water condition is. We wanted to know how far and how much damage we've done to global river networks across all countries and across all continents. So we assemble a team of researchers from all continents. And what is interesting is that in South Africa, based on this analysis, nearly 50% of our rivers are considered very impaired. And I really don't want you to. But in terms of the work that I've been doing to date, one of the biggest culprits is wastewater treatment works. Like I said earlier, a lot of our wastewater treatment works in South Africa right now are not functioning properly. And we did a rapid analysis based on the data in the National Information System hosted by the Department of Water and Sanitation. And what I want to share here is that apart from the fact that a lot of wastewater treatment works are not complying to the chemical, physical, and microbial guidelines, it appears that compliance has actually declined between 2017 to 2024. So we really have a lot of work to do. And if we're going to address some of the water degradation, especially ecosystems that we see today, we have to really do something about our wastewater treatment works. Now I'm moving to a more topical area of research that I've been involved and leading for some time now, the world of plastic pollution. And I ask the question here, how worried should we be? And I want to tell you that microplastic, unfortunately, have been found in the air that we breathe, in the water. And in fact, not long ago, microplastic were reported to have been seen in the brain. So in the lungs, blood tissues, microplastic are just everywhere. They are just everywhere. So what we've done, we said, okay, if microplastics or plastics, sometimes when I go to rivers, I see plastics everywhere. So we've done some work. We wanted to know when these microplastics are in the environment, do they become vectors for pharmaceutical pollutants? So we know that pharmaceutical products or their derivatives are found in the environment, in our waters. So we wanted to understand whether once you have microplastics in the environment, whether they can absorb these pharmaceutical pollutants and become vectors or transporters of these plastics. And what we found in, particularly for the hormones, we found that microplastics are able to absorb some of the pharmaceutical pollutants. And in fact, to some extent, in some areas, the concentration that they have absorbed are actually higher than those in the ambient environment. But not just the pharmaceutical pollutants. We also wanted to understand whether these microplastics, so what actually happens when you have microplastics in the environment, biofilms grow on them, and these biofilms are chemically charged. And because of that, antibiotic-resistant bacteria and genes get absorbed onto these microplastics biofilms. So in addition that they are being vectors of pharmaceutical pollutants in the environment, they are also acting as vectors of antibiotic-resistant genes and bacteria. And we know of the crisis of antibiotic resistance globally. So next time when you use plastic, consider that it may end up in the environment. So we have to do something about plastic consumption. Not only that, these plastics are acting as vectors of chemical pollutants, they are also being found in the guts of the organisms in the environment. And we've also found them to be attached to the gills of some of these organisms in the environment. So indeed, plastic and microplastics, especially microplastics, have been found in the guts and in the gills of organisms in the environment. Part of our work also wanted to look at the bigger plastics. Apart from the micro, we have the bigger plastics in the environment. We wanted to also know whether these bigger plastics, once they are in the river, do they become habitat for some of the organisms in the river? And what we are finding is that indeed, once these plastics are in the environment, the macroinvertebrate, the organisms in the environment actually colonize these plastics. And they are now becoming suitable habitat for these macroinvertebrates. But does that mean that they are providing some good services in the environment? No. We really have to begin to think about plastic consumption and the way we manage plastics across the value chain. Now I'm moving gradually to some of the work that we've done in terms of water quality contestation. And the story, what you see here is the Var barrage in Johannesburg area. Okay. So, and if you are familiar with Johannesburg in South Africa, it is the most industrialized area. And what has happened there is that the Department of Water and Sanitation issued a water quality license to one of the biggest industry in that area. But what happened was that there was contestation. The industry was now questioning the department. How did you derive the standard that you have issued to me? What is the scientific method that you've used and how credible? So there was contestation. And because there was contestation, both the department and this particular water user had to come to Rose University to ask us to come and do a study for them in order to better understand what was going on. So what we did, we developed a model, and the story here is that from the result, what we found is that even if the industry were to be uplifted from the catchment, so now there's no industry discharging into the system, zero waste being discharged, there will be no significant improvement in terms of the water quality. And what that result suggests is that actually that particular water system has been so much polluted, and because of so much development, if you must resolve that, you really have to use a catchment-wide approach. Bring every stakeholder together and begin to develop a solution that brings everyone together. So through the modeling exercise that we did, we were able to resolve this problem. And I believe that the department and the various stakeholders are now in the process of engaging. And in fact, about 2 weeks ago, we were invited to make contribution to the process of developing integrated water catchment, water quality catchment management strategy for that particular catchment. And one of the ways in which we have contributed to the ways in which water resources are managed in South Africa is through the development of the South African water quality guidelines. So before now, we were using the 1996 guidelines that were developed, and these 1996 guidelines were developed before the 1998 law. So there was no alignment between the 1998 piece of legislation and the guidelines. Now, working with me, Dr. Neil, and other colleagues, we have now developed the new South African water quality guidelines. And what we've done there is to use a risk-based approach. And we've now moved the guideline from paper-based guidelines to software. And I invite all those who may be interested to download the software and use the guideline. These are now the new South African water quality guidelines. Equity, sustainability, and efficiency, like I said earlier, are foundational to the way in which water resources are managed in South Africa. I want to share some stories with you in terms of how the pursuit of the goal of equity is taking place in the intersection of water, agriculture, and land. So the photo that you see here a photo that I took from the Lower Sunday Rivers Valley. I have been working in this particular area, and if you are very familiar with this area, you will know that citrus farming is very extensive in this particular area. The then minister, Kada Asma, before he passed away, reserved water for the irrigation of about 3,000 hectares of land in this particular valley. And the idea was that this water may only be accessed by what they call emerging farmers. So the water was set aside for the purpose of the pursuit of equity goal. We want to make emerging farmers to become commercial farmers. But the work that we've done suggests that the pursuit of equity is so challenging. And a lot of the emerging farmers have not become commercial farmers after so many years. And what does this mean? One of the findings is that when you single-mindedly pursue equity without thinking about efficiency and without thinking about sustainability, you find yourself in big problem. Because fundamentally, equity, efficiency, and sustainability actually interact. And if you pursue one of these values without taking cognizance of the other, you find yourself in serious problem. So our recommendation from this work is that we really have to consider the idea of temporality, so the idea of time. You have to give some time to emerging farmers to develop the necessary skills in order to become sustainable. And I have some good news for you. Recently, precisely on the 21st of June, 2024, the Department of Water and Sanitation has now published the revised water pricing strategy for raw water use in South Africa. And what is critical that I want to share with you tonight is that now emerging farmers will not have to pay for water immediately. So the payment of water will be phased in over time. Because one of the research findings was that emerging farmers were complaining that even though you have not used the water, as soon as water has been allocated to you, you have to pay. And this was not really helping them. As you know, the Nelson Mandela Bay has also been under the grip of drought for some time. But what has happened is that you can govern water services during drought using different instruments. The graph here shows the water consumption over time and the period in which the metro has experienced droughts. And the work that we've done in that particular area, which is currently ongoing, suggests that during drought in the Nelson Mandela Bay, the household that we are experiencing interruption in water supply. So Grahamstown was not alone, or it's not alone. Okay. Even Nelson Mandela Bay household, we are experiencing quite considerable interruptions. So in 2017, when the drought was just beginning, only about 4.4% of households reported interruption of water supply. And at the depth of the drought, this increased to about 37.6% of households experiencing drought. And we know that when you experience drought, when water supply has been interrupted, the poor are always the most affected. And the municipality has to implement a number of measures. But what I want to share with you today is how some of these measures, when they are implemented, you really have to take account the equity dimension of how these measures are being implemented, to the extent that water is also a justice issue. One of the measures is the use of step tariff. So the way stepped tariff work is that the more water you consume, the more you pay. But depending on the amount of water that is available to the metro, they can also increase the tariff on water so that people begin to pay more And the idea is that when you increase tariff, you're going to actually force people to use less and less water. It doesn't always work. And in fact, what we found is that people who can afford water, okay, they will just buy water and augment their supply through alternative mechanism. But even among the poor, because the municipality has what we call assistance to the poor, it means that they don't necessarily pay for what they are consuming. They were not also adhering to using less water. And what you see here, among one of the poor households, and I can guarantee you that the name is not there, okay? It's a bill of 1 million rands. 1 million, 1040. It's a municipal bill of 1 million rands that is being owned by this particular household to the municipality. But why is this the case? Our research suggests that bill inheritance. So your grandparents were using water, they were not paying, then your parents started using the water, they didn't pay, and now the house is not belonging to you. You get the house with a bill of 1 million. So even if you decide to sell the house, you will still be indebted to the municipality. In some instances, the tenant will pay, but the landlord will not pay the municipality. They will use the money for something else. Okay. And because of this, there were incidences and cases of bill dispute between the municipality and households. So we asked some of these low-income households whether the way in which the step tariff was using is a pattern on them. And as you can see, a number of them said they are now unable to pay for other household purchases because of stepped tariff. So the lesson here is that when we implement measures in response to water crisis, we really have to consider the measure we are implementing holistically. We also have to consider the history of the particular context in which we are working. As I conclude my presentation, I want to say that the business of water and water research is everyone's business. And this has influenced the way I work. I believe that in our communities, people that we work with are legitimate knowledge holders. And in fact, they know more than us, especially in terms of place-based knowledge. And I also believe that the way we work, we should begin to work with practitioners as well and across disciplines, from the natural sciences to the social sciences to humanities. And the photos you see here, these are some of the amazing people that we work with in the Eastern Cape. And the one there is in Senegal, where we are looking at the catchment and trying to understand the issues of water across in South Africa and in Senegal. We are not just philosophizing about water. We are not just writing academic papers about water. We actually do stuff. And the photo you see here, we are working with what we call catchment champions in the Nelson Mandela Bay areas, where we are physically removing plastics from water resources, but at the same time, we also design what we call artificial wetlands and deploy this into the river because these wetlands can absorb chemical pollutants from the water. And this caught the eyes of this particular newspaper, and they wrote floating wetlands deployed to clean up the swakups. So the way I have worked is on the understanding that You really have to set up collaborative platform that brings together the private sector, communities, academic institutions, governments across various scales. It is precisely by working in this way that we can address the complex water challenges that now confront us in South Africa and across the continent. And I know that when you give your inaugural lecture, you have to tell the people what you will be doing. And I want to say that what I will be doing is what I have been telling you. I will just continue to do this. But before I conclude, remember that I said that I'm a trained natural scientist and not a social scientist, even though sometimes when I present, people confuse me for social scientist. I am not. But I present this way and I work this way because I have worked with amazing scholars in the humanities and social sciences. And Professor Hiller, Lord Sisika, please wave your hand and let us just appreciate you, has deeply influenced some of my thinking. Each time I talk to Professor Innocent Msindo at the African Studies Center, everything is about history. We are today, but you will begin to tell me in 1942. Let's see where this came from. Say, Prof, let's do it here. Colleagues, my task going ahead is to strengthen capacity in the water sector. And I believe that in Africa, the challenges that confront South Africa are common. And we need to think about how to use an African-wide approach. We have started this already. We've implemented projects where we supported students drawn from so many countries on the continent, as you can see. And going forward, I will be devoting much of my time to doing this in terms of capacity strengthening. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. And even though as originally in the introduction from the DVC, she mentioned your reading and when you were asked to pause that you started again, I'm pleased to say that even though throughout your career, you've obviously paused at certain points, not to start all over again, but rather to reflect deeply on what you have done. So I'd like to thank you and congratulate you. And here's a small token of our appreciation. I would really like to invite all of you, and you've really drawn quite a crowd here today, to join us for a bit of cocktails outside and to just share in this moment with Professor Nelson Odume.